Okay. Good morning. We are giving out them now. Good morning and welcome to this third day of a gathering for rehearsing Hospitalities. And my name is Jussi Koitela, head of program at Frame Contemporary Art Finland. I just give quickly on the introduction of this session and also some practical information, and then we can go on the presentations and the conversation. Yes, just about from some practical things. We are also streaming the sound from this session, so please, whenever you are speaking or commenting, please do it for the microphone, and also the live captions would appear also in here. And then there is visual mapping also of the content of the session done by Yvonne Billmore, who is finally present physically in the space after 2 days, which is really nice. And then just kind of reminding you also about the safer spaces guidelines. You can see it in the door, so let's be kind and understanding for each other. And then I just now want to mention again, because yesterday I kind of missed half of the information. The carpets which are here are provided by different art organizations and institutions in the city or in Helsinki. So it's a kind of a way of co-hosting and sharing some resources at the same time. They are from Theatre Academy, Vantaa Art Museum, Emma Espoo Museum of Modern Art, Helsinki Art Museum, HAM Design Museum, Helsinki International Artist Program, HIAP, Myymälä 2, Artistron Space, Outo-Olo, also Artistron Space, Museum of Impossible Forms, and then Urban ABBA Festival or platform. Yeah. So big thanks to all of the organizations who have who are hosting us through the carpet donation or loan. So basically that. Yes. So then about this session more. This session focuses on their penal and care institutions that control and reproduce human life throughout its growth from birth to the aging body-mind. Through institutional control and care by schools, prisons and hospitals, individuals and communities learn to recognize behavior that is not approved and that is considered productive. These institutions are also part of the racist, patriarchal and capitalist structures that ban care as well as a control for certain individuals and communities in order to regulate their possibilities to live off from commonwealth and prosperity. The power of penal and care and educational institutions lies in the reproduction of certain kinds of normalized body minds and economic orders that benefit the ruling elite. The depowering institutions means to act and live through practices that repair and replace the effects of institutional control and hierarchies within the institutions and beyond that. So quite a cynical maybe introduction what institution is. So maybe we can have a little bit more positive voices also throughout the discussion and the presentations. So yeah, it's a little bit like kind of a provocative for me to kind of provocative introduction to kind of open up to really kind of negative idea of institution in the beginning. So this session presents artistic practices situated within and outside of penal and educational care institutions. The conversations brings together artists, researcher, psychiatrist and poet to unpack their practices and collectively explore potential of depowering tactics we can also discuss maybe what is depowering. Let's see. Yeah, and we have here, no, I just want to say we need to change a little bit the order of the presentations. She's there. Okay. Let's still change the order. Okay, so we changed a little bit the order of the presentations. We start from Anastasia Artemeva and Arlene Tucker, who had worked together with the project called Prison Outside, Free Translation, or kind of combined their projects together. Then we have a presentation of Anissa R. Lewis, and then I will introduce more of the content and the presenters later. And then Birgit Bundesen and Anna Rieder here, and then Eva Koťátková at the end. And then we have a break, and also we have a break in between of these presentations. And then there's a time for conversation. Yes, but we start from Anastasia and Arlene. Maybe you can come on the stage already. And that's why you also got those papers and pens. You can maybe sit here.
Yeah.
Anastasia Artemeva is a visual and socially engaged artist based in Helsinki. She creates sculptural installations, process-based works, and in art and non-art context, often together with or based on the communication with people with different life experiences. Arlene Tucker is socially engaged. Tucker's socially engaged work utilizes translation studies, semiotics, and feminist practices. So there were really short introductions. Anastasia and Arlene have collaborated in the context of Prison Outside Free Translation project, showcasing international works from currently or formerly incarcerated people, as well as anyone affected by imprisonment. They aim to promote self-expression, solidarity, communication between people of all walks of life. So you are welcome to start. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Can you see the slides?
Thank you. So I'm Anastasia Artemeva, and I will start today's session by briefly introducing Prison Outside project. I have here my notes, so excuse my looking at the phone. Just to a little bit give the history and what's been going on and how we got to where we are right now. So the project was established in 2015, and so basically I was interested, and I really wanted to find out a way to connect with people affected by incarceration as a person who've come completely from the outside. And for me, ideas of judgment and ideas of isolation and also ideas of fear that have been connected with imprisonment and have been even more difficult for me to understand since somebody I knew went to prison, and it became really kind of personal. So I wanted to kind of reach in and reach out at the same time. So this is a first project by Prison Outside, which was created in collaboration with Aalto University, with Performance Arts Center Eskus, and then with Helsinki Prison. So literally what we did with my friend and fellow artist Annika, we went to Helsinki Prison and created their postcards with men who were at the time there, and then we had the similar workshops, kind of response workshops on the outside, literally on the outside of the prison wall, because it's located in kind of a city center, quite close to the city center. So it's like an institution right in Helsinki, in the capital. capital city of Finland. So we've met with, we had 2 groups, and we exchanged these postcards, which were based on like everyday things, like what kind of food you like, or what kind of food do you have every day. And we shared recipes, and then we shared view out of the window, things like that. And then we wrote questions for each other. And then outside we had families, and we had kids as well who've come there with their families. And then so this went on for several months, and then there was an exhibition in Kalliokunsalle after that. So for me it was important to create a communication between people of completely different life situations, even though they're literally located like in the same city environment, but live in completely different contexts. So it's for me. I've worked also in different kind of institutions in Finland who are connected with incarceration. For instance, this workshop was in Rehearsing. There is a long, around 100 years, I don't know, around maybe 90 years, established support network, non-governmental support network for people affected by incarceration called CRITS. So they run all kinds of programs, from housing to employment to creative programs and such. So they have a day center where I did workshops, things like that. And then we have since it's always been a collaborative process. So pretty much always I've had another artist or a friend working with me, which I found very important to create also collaboration within sort of artistic community, and then reach out together to kind of join our forces there. And we've expanded this process also to outside of Finland. And since 2017, when Arlene came to the project, we've worked with institutions in Russia for quite a long time. And there it was universities, and then it was also non-governmental organizations. We've always been trying to find ways to reach in, because, well, first of all, because prison as an institution is very, very different in different contexts and in different countries. So ways to, well, the conditions that people are facing there are completely different. So each connection has been definitely very individual. It's hard to say like, oh, we work with prisons, because we work with individuals who are affected by incarceration, because it's such a broad statement that no one wants to be labeled as a prisoner or as a criminal or anything like that. So we say affected by incarceration, and this is the sort of a institutional framework that we've been working with, but for sure no other, there's no such a thing as like prisoner or criminal or anything like that. So, and then since then we've been working with so basically we reach out to people via in some countries where it's possible, we reach out to people via the structures that are established, like prisons and support centers that the government runs or that NGOs run. In Russia, it's not really possible. So we work with universities who have connections, and we work with charitable organizations, and then we kind of work also with activists, and we find connections this way. We work with places work with the United States. Arlene went to Colombia, and Ireland, Finland, of course, have been our kind of areas where we work. So we
also, the way we connect with people depends on the restrictions or the capabilities that you can, if you can go to prison, for example, to work with people there. So for example, when we were in Russia, I cannot go because I'm not a Russian citizen. So we connected with social workers. And in this picture on your right, that is a workshop we did with a group of youth, teenagers that in Kaluga that that have parents, for example, who are incarcerated, or I think some of them were orphans, for example. So different ways of connecting.
And so we have also kind of a information sort of, we gather interviews, and we gather, we're very happy and grateful that other people who work with prisons have shared their experiences with us. So we have had 2 prison outside conferences where people travel from all over the world to Helsinki. And then we also have a website that is in 3 languages. Is it in English mostly, then Russian and Finnish is the languages we've been working with to, I suppose, in order to share the information and artistic techniques and techniques that we use and others who have interviewed use to discuss this topic. And sometimes it's not only currently the current kind of situation, but also about the past, which I find very important to remember and to learn from. So could you perhaps talk a little bit about that also picture on the right, the interview that you had with...
Yes, so this woman that I met in Brooklyn, New York, she is working with youth as well. So thinking about what it means to be incorrigible and how to, well, nurture your nurture your authentic self in a way. So they have a program that is geared towards at-risk teenagers.
And they focus on looking at the archive of incarcerated young people in New York State in early 20th century and kind of onwards, and to unpack the effect that it has had on these women, and then and now, and how the institutionalization and judgment continues now, and then how can we move on from that.
And then at the symposium, we invited filmmakers, visual artists, and other people who give space to voice, give space to create, and also on the basis of opening the question of who is or who is not affected by incarceration, and what it means to be inside and or outside.
And in 2018, the second Prison Outside Conference was quite a lot focused on experiences from Russia. So we were very grateful for the opportunity to invite people from Russian universities. And it was a project supported by Kone Foundation. So it was in probably one of the last kind of opportunities for professionals and students to travel from Russia, and openly or somewhat being able to discuss the current situation with imprisonment and with socialization and with treatment of incarcerated individuals there particularly. So our current focus, so for the past couple of years, with participation and curation of Arlene's project, Translation as Dialogue, free translation has been like maybe one of the main strands of Prison Outside's work. So it's a way to connect with individuals through a very certain process.
Okay, so maybe it's easiest to understand by doing. That's at least my way. So everybody got a piece of paper and pen. You don't have to use this one, just anything we're going to make a translation. But first I wanted to ask if anybody would like to volunteer to read this poem by Eva Koťátková, who I will speak more about him later, but if there are any volunteers? Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah.
Should I stand up?
Anything?
I'm not sure if I can read it.
Do the best that you can.
Nuoruuttani silmiin katsoen, raunioista sen. Tänään todellisuuden havaitsen. Joka päivä ajan itkuun, nauruun sekä linnun lauluun heräilen yhä, raunioita peläten. Portaalle maailmani tuulen kuulen. Orkesterin tahtojeni, tähtien. Can you read that word? Soittavan. Sävellyksiin sateen, pisaroihin, puhtaisiin. Mahtuu mieli suuri, pieni, kun kävelet tiesi. Katsot, minne se viekin, on se jo jotain. Mitä sitten? On kokonainen kysymys. Elämä, kahleitansa kilistellen, ovelle jokaisen koputellen, ymmärrystä etsii. I need help again. Joskus jotain löytääkin, ja aina vain. Tulevaisuus tuulessa leijailee. Planeettamme maat ja meret mieleni kuviin piirtelee. Elä se. Kaikesta huolimatta ole itse. Sorry for that. That wasn't the best, but
Kiitos.
thank you.
Yeah, that was perfect. So we invite you now to translate that. You can draw it, you can write it, you can pick something out from that experience and interpret it into another medium. So here's the thing, when we're translating, I'm coming from the perspective that we're in a constant state of translation. Here I'm translating touch to sound, image to picture, and your mind is always wanting to understand. Or is it? And so when we're translating, whether it's a language that you may not know, you're picking up on sounds, and you can translate that into another line, into you're the translator, so you choose what is popping out at you. So this is also pushing in the free translation sessions, touching on what is your comfort zones, what are your uncomfort zones, what is new to you. Are you willing or want to test what it means to be a translator or to translate? So that is the invitation that we offer when one comes to the free translation sessions. Does that make sense? Okay, great. And then within that time together, I mean, I just love translation techniques and how we've been able to use that as a way to create and also as a way to show the inspiration evolution or the evolution of inspiration or how you inspire somebody else through your marks. And questions of source text, target text, how we are in this process that now, so could you please go to the next slide? So Kari's poem was a translation of this image. And you have the agency to decide what you want to translate or what you want to bring into another language. When I was speaking with Kari, who recently passed away, he was an amazing artist and friend, and he worked with Porti Teatri, which is a local theater here for people who have been recently released from prison. And he told me that writing was his language. And thankfully, he always had his writing. So when he came to the free translation sessions, he would try drawing because that was his uncomfort zone. But then the drawing would also inspire his writing, which in the end, his new target text, which would then become our new, or it would become the source text, would be a platform for other venues. Does that make sense? Raya, does that make sense? Okay, yeah. If you can go to the next slide. So here are other examples of translations and the translation process. So we've been working a lot with Carol Alden, who when we first met her, she wrote me a letter from prison. She was in prison in the United States, and she wrote me a long letter. And we met her through Justice Arts Coalition, an organization in the United States. And we did a workshop in the English school in Helsinki. And a teenager did the translation on the right. And the conversations that have opened up about justice, injustice, how do we translate, what is a translation, and how the empathy grows. I remember particularly in this one class, they wanted to know what the artist did to be put in prison. And I told a bit about what I knew, but there was this massive discussion about how certain crimes deserve certain repercussions. And so all of these topics have come up in our sessions together. Can you go to the next slide, please?
Well, I just wanted also to say that the process had been so we have this website, so free translation has been working like that. So we have put out an open call to all the different people that we knew, all the institutions we knew, to send us artworks that can be, that if you feel like you have been affected by incarceration, you could submit artwork to the free translation exhibition. And it's online, we update it and we put them all online. And we had several exhibitions in physical spaces. And and we have had many of these free translation sessions where anybody can come and create a translation based on either based on the work that they choose from the website, or sometimes we pick works, sometimes we have the artist who created the original one to give their comments, and it kind of goes like that. It's a continuous process. So Thomas has sent us a photograph of this, of this work, and then we had a translation session where Gaia had drawn this work based on the painting, and then we had a phone call with Thomas because he's in prison in where in the United States?
Texas.
In Texas, and so we had a Zoom with somebody who could call him on the phone. So they were on Zoom on the screen, and then on the phone, and he only had like certain minutes at the time, so he had to like keep putting on coins and calling back, and then so he was able to only hear what the drawing looked like, for example, because we weren't able to straight away and show him, or obviously there's no like video or anything like that. And then was it so that then we emailed also text describing the drawing, because you couldn't send images.
You can't send images, and you also you can't surf the net, so he didn't have access to that. So this forced the translation of an image, if that's what the translator decided to use, and then write down a description of their artwork, and I then sent it to Thomas. So finding ways to be inclusive and have it accessible to whoever wants to join.
And then Gaia's drawing we had as a source text during a workshop in Mikkeli in support center for people affected by incarceration. It was like a support session during Mental Health Art Week. It was a really good experience working with an institution. And then then Salvador created a response or a translation of the drawing using mixed media techniques and textiles and
and then reflecting on why they chose this to like it's all about coding and decoding. So you can choose, pick up on a color, pick up on what this means to you, and translate that into another medium. And the stories that come out of why they chose that is extremely important. Do you want to go to the next slide?
that's it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. There's a comment, question from audience. Would be nice to hear.
I have a question for you all.
Yeah.
How did the translation process go for you? Would anybody want to share your translation? Takes a while.
Maybe I have a question actually related a little bit on this reaction too of people like thinking about. I would like to hear like where you are approaching people, for example, in prisons. You kind of who probably people like are doing drawing, doing creative things anyway. But then I'm somehow thinking about how do you, when you are approaching them as a project or in a way as an institution, how that kind of a conversation, what happens in the conversation and what are the kind of dialogue and kind of, that would be really interesting to hear about that a bit.
Do you mean like practically or?
Maybe practically, and also like somehow how do you explain or how do you introduce the project or how, like what, like how do you kind of get people to work with you? That's also kind of interesting,
Well, for example, through Carol and Tomas, and also through Kari's original piece, those artists came through Justice Arts Coalition. So Wendy was a huge help in sharing Free Translation Project and what Prison Outside is about. And she was very supportive in just directly contacting artists of, hey, this seems like this would be great for you. Would you like to submit an artwork? And then the translation started coming on our end, and then that's how the flow began. So it wasn't, I mean, I never thought of ourselves as an institution. It was more like, we're artists, and we're inviting you to share your artwork with us. So maybe that made it a bit more approachable and relatable, because when I speak with the artists, we talk about our artistic process and what it means to us.
I think we have always kind of had somebody who our artists and collaborators trust, because it's, or at least quite often anyway, because I feel like we come in, you know, for a short time really, and then I found it always very important that, for instance, be it in Helsinki prison, a social worker who is there and thinking, oh, this sounds great, I'm going to, like, so it takes like months and months to find somebody who would be interested in an institution, because we do work with closed kind of institutions, and that is a huge amount of work to find a connecting point, like literally to be able to reach in. And quite often it has been women. It has been women who are social workers or psychologists maybe, or somebody who is kind of there to, at least, no, there to, their job is to support the mental health of people they work with. So, and it takes a long time to find, and then we're always really grateful when somebody is like, oh, that sounds great. And then they've also developed trust with people they work with. So they know that, okay, this, I don't know, somebody recommends this, Anna says it's good, this is a nice art thing, I would like to come and see what it's about. I found that quite a lot from experience. So it's been very important, like the institution part for me.
Thanks. Yeah.
Hi. I would like to know if you see this project as part of as within the social work companionship that it could be offered to somebody who is in this situation, or if you see this project as a satellite of some sort of structure that is given at some point in certain places, because I don't think everybody has. I mean, to me, this is a great opportunity for an institution to provide to somebody who is inside, right? And in that sense, it offers some sort of companionship, right? Because I think it's not only, just to come in a certain point and then just go away, right? I think this is a mechanism that could be an advantage for somebody to transcend that situation, right? So I don't know if you have kind of like come together with other social workers to talk about the opportunities that these projects could give in a longer term. Yeah.
I mean, that's the ideal situation. Trying to get traction has been challenging for us. I mean, thankfully, we found some people who trust us and who believe in the project, and they've been a huge help in moving it forward. But to make it sustainable has been difficult. Do you want to speak more about that?
Yeah, no, I agree. We have had like these sessions for professionals, and where we've invited people to to join, and we have somebody join, maybe not loads. It's really hard. Yeah, and through educational, like through with students, we've worked a lot. So hopefully that's. Also, we don't really know how far, like where it goes once it's out of our hands, because we've had a lot of sessions with students, with social workers, and I hope they also apply it further in their work. Maybe they don't necessarily always have time to tell us about it, or to have some kind of report or something like that. But we certainly also are happy if it continues, even if it's not anymore sort of prison outside project or whatever. So we do, I think Arlene particularly, really trying to make it accessible for everybody who is in the room, and like welcoming, so it can be further applied without any label like that it's like our project or whatever.
Yeah, and then also creating events or ways that we're working with institutions, but then also we've been holding free translation sessions in different places. So also accessing different communities in that way, that it's not just through an institution, for example, but because we're all in different stages of our lives as well, and where we find each other.
I lost my voice. Yeah, thank you. I think we need to move on, and we will have at the end time to speak more. So thanks a lot, Anastasia and Arlene.
Thank you.
If you can you no, it's not. Oh yeah, good. Oh yes. Now we are going to the presentation by Anissa R. Lewis. Anissa, can you hear us? You can? Great. I will just present you quickly, and then you can...
Good morning.
Yeah, we can hear you too. Great.
Awesome.
Anissa R. Lewis moved to Philadelphia, where her deep belief in community, identity, agency, justice, and voice led her to many projects and collaborations. Some of these include arts-based women empowerment classes for Philadelphia County Prison Drug and Alcohol Abuse Unit. Now Anissa will open up about how these experiences have helped her to work to address matters of identity, civic engagement, and neighborhood relationship in her hometown, Covington, Kentucky. Anissa, you are welcome to start. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for this opportunity to share my experience and share my work. Really wonderful to hear the work by the previous presenters. When asked to give this talk, or to view my work in this perspective, a lot of things did come to mind. So I think that this presentation is going to be a bit part musing, part autobiographical, a lot of different ideas, and I hope that it kind of all comes together. So if you would permit me this opportunity to just kind of jump around and to share ideas and to share experiences. And one last disclaimer, I do want to apologize. My son is sleeping in the other room, and he's sick. So if you see me looking down, I'm staring at the monitor, making sure he doesn't stir too much. So if you wouldn't mind going to the first slide. So a bit of background about the work is that when I did the project, or when I collaborated with the other artists on this work, I was just coming from grad school. And so it was very kind of happenstance that I was looking for a way in which to engage with the community. I was teaching art classes, and if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. The organization that made this possible was Temple University PASEP, Pan-African Studies Community Education Program. And what that organization was is that in the US with universities, because of wanting to have a relationship with the surrounding community in which they exist, they will offer community education opportunities. And Temple University is placed in Northern Philadelphia, which is a community that is one of the most poorest and most a community that struggles a lot in terms of education, employment. Think of anything that is plaguing or impacting a community, and you will find it here. And so PASEP was ran by professors who, having to do with Black studies, Africana studies, who wanted to have a significant and intentional impact in the Northern Philadelphia community. And because of the plight and the issues of Black and brown bodies, as it relates to the prison system, this collaboration, this partnership was one of great importance in PASEP. So PASEP was started by Ann Hyman back in the mid-70s, and it still exists today. It's going on close to 50 years. And so, which I was really happy to see when I was doing research for this presentation, that this organization still exists. There is still this commitment by this organization to have connects for that people in the community can be able to have resources through the university for educational opportunities. So my work in the Philadelphia correctional county corrections would not have been possible had it not been for PASEP. I think that is very important to understand that the structures that exist in order to be able to facilitate these experiences, that you have a community organization operating out of a university, having connections with a correctional facilities institution. And just like in with the previous presenters, Anastasia and Arlene, the connect on the other side was with a social worker, was with a counselor, because our work was working with a specific unit in the correctional facility. We did not have access to the general population of the women there, strictly and solely with alcohol and drug abuse. Because typically in those situations, their offenses are considered to be mitigated by alcohol abuse, drug abuse. And so given that there is a lot to unpack, then a lot more services are provided, given that situation. Not to say that it wasn't the case for women who were in the general population. This was only what I had access to, and what I was only aware of. So the social worker was able to provide the opportunity for us to come into the prison and to do empowerment classes with the women. And I'm assuming that is, alongside of other counseling services. So myself, a poet, a screenwriter, so theater, writing, visual arts. together we team taught these classes with the women, and we viewed it very much as providing an opportunity, holding a space for there to be that exploration of voice, of experience, of establishing, of reconnecting with self and identity. Because in while there, women are no longer around the alcohol or the drugs, and so by that, by the very nature of that experience, having to come to grips with, being sober, not being influenced by a substance. Who are you? What has transpired in your life that is, resulting in where you are right now and what you are experiencing and what you're thinking? And who is it that you want to be? And what is a way in which that you can start rebuilding and reconnecting, and also making decisions about your life going forward? So our experiences with the women were about journaling, creative writing, quilting, self-portraits that were about voice and identity, creating symbols, creating words of power, and letting those experiences be a way in which women can reconnect with self. So the program ran for a few years, and then each of us ended up taking our separate paths, as it were. That program no longer exists in that iteration, but from what I was able to see on PASEP's website currently, there still is programming that is connected with the prison system. So that is a bit of background about what that experience entailed and what made that possible. What institutions were connecting, were collaborating, but all through what was viewed as important to the professors, the community volunteers who were teaching the classes, as well as the social worker. That connection, that network, that believed so heavily in the work. So if we go to the next slide. So where I want to pivot next is that when I think about my work as it now and being community informed, community directed, I think about what are the philosophies, what are the ideas that are driving it? What is that theoretical framework, if you will? And the next few slides are pulling from Tom Finkelpearl's book, What We Made, and particularly the first chapter, which is about socially cooperative work. And in that first chapter, he is doing a bit of history as well as theory, and talking about when artists engage in community participatory work, that it's not, obviously it's not coming from nowhere, but given that that work is so much driven by the compelling need for social justice and social change and social impact, what are the ways that we're approaching this work? If we could go back to the previous slide, please. So what is really fascinating, or something that I've been thinking about as of late, is that when we are going about this work, that we are kind of, thinking about two crossroads, or not to say that there's only two, obviously it's not, this isn't a binary thing, but that are we thinking about our work? Are we coming from the approach that we are working within a system, and that this system is to be changed, is to be re-envisioned so that it benefits all who participate, meaning that we have a belief that if this is our system and that this is the way that we're going to engage, then how can it then be a system that we arrive at? I know utopian is pretty lofty, but how can these communities operate in a way that best serves us all? So thinking of it in terms of uh, mutuality, that we are a family, we are a brotherhood, a sisterhood, we are connected, and that my freedom, my good is tied to your good. And if we cannot, and if I am not thriving at my best, then you are not thriving at yours, and vice versa. So is this the way that we are approaching our work and thinking that that's what we're striving towards? Um, or is it a matter of this is this is no good for anybody involved? This is not a way in which anybody can exist and can 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 live and can thrive. And so we need to then instead create other systems that rival, that upend, that run counter to. And in the book, it's very well laid out in terms of how we saw things happening in the civil rights movement and those who were leading those ideas at the time, in addition to Saul Alinsky. Something else that I think, in the next slide, something else that when I think about, when artists are working in a participatory manner in with social practice for social impact and justice and change, that um, how is the artist acting as a facilitator to that? How is the artist coming alongside those with whom they are collaborating, um, to um, to have voice, skill, experience, real problem solving, real work that brings about real and impactful and sustainable change. How can an artist leverage their skill set, leverage their approach and their way to their work towards that end? And so with his book of Rules for Radical, as Solinsky was doing community organizing, um, something else that really stuck out with me, if you go to the next slide, please, is that regardless of what the work is that we're trying to do, um, that it is work where we are intentionally disrupting, we are here to disrupt the status quo, that our work is about conflict. So regardless of the institutions with whom we work, with whom the systems in which we exist, that this work um, is meant to disrupt, is meant to change, is meant to question, and to, by its very existence, mean to be a source of conflict, of being that provocateur, if you will. Next slide, please. But then there's that question of how is the artist engaging with community residents, engaging with those who are, regardless of the approach, working in the system or working deliberately to change and to bring in a new system. How is the work happening? What is the nature of the relationship? What is the nature of the collaboration? And to be very mindful that if an artist is coming alongside of, fellow collaborators, what is that role? In what capacity? And something that to be very, very intentional and to be very sensitive to is that it is one of coming alongside, that it is asset based. And something that I forgot to mention earlier, another reason why I was mentioning Saul Alinsky's work is because that is where it is brought into the conversation and to the approach of work that the people who are experiencing the issue, the people who are the most greatly impacted by what is happening, that they know the solution. That it's not to be this kind of patriarchal role or some kind of savior complex, but that it is how can our skills and our assets be leveraged for change? How can the work be from the very experiences, the very skills, the very voice of those who are the greatest impacted, so that they are the ones who are exercising their agency for change. I hope that makes sense. So those are things that those are just some ideas that I think are very important to have in the conversation. When we think about the work that we're doing as it relates to working within institutions or working outside of institutions to then change the institution. Next slide, please. So what does this have to do with lots? You'd be surprised. So that work happened, back in what I kind of consider as my coming of age story when I was living in Philadelphia. Shortly thereafter, when the nonprofit that I was working with had sunsetted, I ended up coming back home to Covington, Kentucky, which sits on the Ohio River. That area, that region of the country is best known as being the Mason-Dixon line. So it is the separation between the North and the South, where slavery was the rule of the day. And immediately to the north in Ohio was the beginning of the Free States. It's also the point where Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote the famous book, Uncle Tom's Cabin. And in many respects, not too different from Northern Philadelphia or North Philadelphia, that particular community, not to the extent of what North Philadelphia was experiencing, but definitely a lot of those same issues. And I apologize if somebody could please put in the chat how I'm doing on time. I know I have a way of getting kind of ran away with stories. I apologize if I'm running over. So when I came back home, this is what I found. This was not how I left, but this is where.
Anissa, just to say
yes.
quickly, you have a few minutes time, so yeah.
All right, understood. Wonderful. So then if we could just hop to the love letter yard signs. So the slide that has the 5, yes, please. Thank you so much. Thank you. So when I came back home, there were the experiences that I had had in Philadelphia about community work, about community organizing, that had gone on to much of the work that I had did at the nonprofit that I had worked at before it had sunset, which then, kind of started my work back home, or then then brought about my move back home, by what I was greeted with, how the community had so greatly changed, and regressed, became became that call to action, and wanting to find ways in which to engage with my community. Next slide, please. So what that meant is that I wanted to engage my community in a conversation, about how our spaces are impacting us, how our spaces have that very strong psychological tie, that what we see when we leave our doors, that we have that connection with, that our communities, particularly our residential communities where we live, where we choose to lay our head every night, that there's a psychological connection and tie. We have pride in where we come from, but when our spaces are not set up in a way that are there to benefit us to strive, or for us to be able to pour in, to be able to have community, then how that is a great impact for how we show up in our day, in our lives. Next slide, please. So what ended up happening with the project is that the conversation, I just wanted to spark the conversation with my community, to see, or to kind of be that love letter, that friendly reminder that we have agency in our spaces. So the project came about by using signage that we use to govern, to dictate how we move through our spaces, what we can and can't do, who's welcomed and who's not welcomed, what is meant to happen in a space. I wanted to leverage that language, and then partner it with lyrics from neo soul music. So Kendrick Lamar, Erykah Badu, PJ Morton, Eric Robeson, to take those also very well-known lyrics and language and pair the two together. Next slide, please. So that we view those spaces as our spaces, we view them as an extension of us. And how can these spaces be re-envisioned, be re-embraced, to then have our communities be what we need them to be who we want to be in our spaces, and to have this signage then act as that starting point of what can happen here, and to be that starting point. From there, other social interactions did happen in other known and shared spaces in the community, that then led to interactive murals and storytelling. And if you continue to advance through the upcoming slides, please. So storytelling with community residents, both long-term and those who had moved to come away, about what does space and place mean to them, how has where we've come from shaped who we are and who we understand ourselves to be. Interactive mural so that we can publicly, but still anonymously, start sparking what do we want in our spaces to then spark future projects, but then to use third spaces to be where we gather, to reconnect as community, to then take that back to our very residences. Thank you. I apologize for running over.
No problem. Thank you. Now, someone wants to have a question or comment? I will just ask quickly. You showed this ladders of civic engagement. If I this slide, I was thinking about like some steps. What were there on those ladders? Raise up. Maybe you can have the slide. I was interested. Like, do you see those as a kind of?
It's number 7, slide number 7.
So, is those something for you which are kind of very concrete steps in the working process also? Like, how do you see it, or more like a theoretical reference? Would be kind of interesting to see how do you relate on some of these things within those steps.
Definitely, like that when I think about my projects and the impact or the engagement that I want to have with my community or those with those with whom I'm seeking collaboration, that I'm always coming from an assets-based approach, meaning that we all are coming with experiences, knowledge, skills that that can be leveraged for the work, and that um, and that it's something for me to be very mindful that artists have another set of skills beyond the typical creative, bag of craft and material, form and function. That when artists are engaging in this work, that there's another set of skills that we need to be very mindful of: ethics, reciprocity, humility, generosity, respect. That what it means to collaborate has its own its own set of engagement, and that to always be operating at the highest level, that when I'm coming along someone, that it's not about my idea, co-opting and picking up the space, but that how can my work be an invitation to, be holding space for, also come alongside with and create a new one with all of the other voices and experiences and skills in the room. And it's just things to be mindful of when we are working, because if the greater issue is to be addressing the change that we want to have within the institution that we are part of, then how can we be very mindful that we're operating at the highest level of that experience with everybody in the room, everybody around the table.
Thank you. Yes.
I wanted to know more about how people receive this kind of work. Do they engage easily? How do they interact and so on?
Mm-hmm. When it came to the love letter yard signs, that was one that I was doing for my community. So because I wanted to just start a conversation, I wanted to bring attention to, just because the nature of what's happening in the community, that a lot of these open lots are not owned by residents in the community. They're owned by outside entities, even though we are the ones who live there. So I wanted there to be a conversation about what can happen in these spaces, because we are impacted by them as well. So that was more of just an invitation to a conversation. When it came to the other works of the storytelling and inviting residents and community members to share stories, because I'm from this community, and we are all connected by our families, that it's viewed more as all of us coming together. It's not so much Anissa the artist, it's Anissa who's, Mary Catherine's grandbaby. So we're having a community dinner. We're sharing our experiences because, because we are close as a community. So and also because in our community, it is a tradition for, passing down stories, passing down experiences, that it was, more so of just like, a family reunion of us coming around the table. So that was a really wonderful experience, because of how we are coming to each other through our relationships, and not you're this community resident and I'm this artist. We have other shared experiences that bring us together. When it came to the paper cranes, in the park, since that was more of a kind of like a, that was, I would say, the most extended, meaning that it was, again, another invitation to come, make a paper crane and come share it in the park and have it, a way to decorate the space. That was, I would say, the loosest in terms of connection, because it's families coming and going, at a day at the pool. But it was just a way to kind of say that we have a hand in shaping our spaces. So I would say that that was, something fun for a family to do in the afternoon, to then invite a conversation about how we feel about our spaces. And so that is something that either someone can choose to do or not, and is, very different from the previous projects.
Thank you, Anissa. Now we need to go on to the next phase. Now we're gonna
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. But we will meet you again in the conversation in the later phase. Yeah. Now we're gonna have a 5 minutes break, and then we are having a reading by Anna Rieder and Birgit Ærenlund. So please come back soon. Okay. Let's start again. Thanks for coming back. Yes. So we are continuing the session, morning session, with the short presentation and reading by Birgit Bundesen and Anna Rieder. I just shortly introduce you. Birgit Bundesen is a psychiatrist and holds BA in comparative literature. She's a senior consultant at Mental Health Care Center Amager in Copenhagen, founder of Danish Center for Arts and Mental Health, and leader of research project Revitalize. Yeah, Revitalize. Yes. Anna Rieder is poet, educated at the Danish Academy of Creative Writing in 2019. Her debut poetry collection, Hindebiger, almost, was published on Arena in December 2020. She subsequently published pamphlets addressing psychiatric doctors with Sitzel Anaveden in 2021 and on Amulet. Birgit and Anna use poetry to engage clinicians, amazingly pronounced for me. Yeah, and artists in constructive dialogue. They are presenting poems from the collection March Again that will be published by Danish publishing house Gyldendalen in spring 2023. Welcome and thanks you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us and being part of this wonderful event. I think the framing of this whole gathering are all themes that we are very much in dialogue with. So we're actually invited for this reading, but we'll just introduce very shortly our mutual project that started in 2017. And yesterday there was a session about doing much with nothing, because we started out with nothing but a crazy idea. And a tender conversation about structural roles and an urgent need for new interventions in psychiatry. I'm a consultant at a ward for young people suffering with psychosis, and the psychiatric treatment system has become very bioreductionist, which means that all other aspects of being a person are not part of the treatment, which is really, really frustrating. So we started out with a good idea and a network of professional writers, fiction authors, who started these participatory creative writing groups that we were able to offer as add-on treatment to patients in psychiatric care at Mental Health Care Center Amager, because I had a boss who supported the project as long as it didn't cost him any money. With time, we were lucky to get funding from the National Danish Arts Council. Then we got a big funding from the Danish government last year. So now we actually have a substantial budget of 2.2 million euro for the next 2 years to actually be a national center for arts and mental health, where we develop these creative intervention, where we work with professional artists and writers and actors and filmmakers to do these participatory art workshop formats, where we have conceptualized them as hybrids between creative art workshops and psychotherapeutic interventions. It means it's not art therapy, so it's art for art's sake, because we think that's what part of that can be a constructive part of a recovery process. The participants suffer from mental illness of different kinds, but they are in different kinds of mental crisis, and because they are that, we have responsibility for their mental health while they're with us. And that means that the professional artists always have a co-therapist with them in the group that participates on equal terms with the other participants. But if there are crises, then it's her responsibility to intervene. It's mostly been me, but we're also training other doctors and psychiatrists to take on this role, which is a very, very joyful and meaningful way to renegotiate power positions between clinicians and patients. So maybe you can introduce the manuscript.
Yes. My name is Anna. I'm a writer and also a user of psychiatry. And this book we're reading an excerpt from was born by accident. I was hospitalized at a emergency ward at the psychiatric hospital where you work, waiting to go to your ward. And I was met by some doctors who I felt didn't understand me, and I couldn't talk to them. Always when I get hospitalized and I have to be in a consultation with a doctor, I shut down and I cannot describe how I feel, and I don't feel like sharing my symptoms and stuff. So I began writing down how I was feeling, and then I sent it to Birgit on emails, and she began responding, but without sending it back to me. And then at some point, I think after the hospitalization, she showed me the poem she had written to me. And then we created a Google Docs, and we started writing poems to each other. And that was very weird, and
It was very
yeah.
That's the disclosure we have to make. It's been a strange process, and that's why the disclaimer is also it's quite vulnerable still. We're not quite sure what it is we have made.
No.
But the publishing house is very keen on publishing it, and it's strange because it's never the texts were never meant for anyone else to read.
No.
So we ask you to bear with us. We also have to say now that now we're also colleagues. We've been able to employ some of our psychiatry users as experts. So Anna has participated in creative writing workshops, and now she's leading her own for other patients, which is a really, really lovely cycle, I think. Yeah.
And just short about the manuscript, we're interested in different things, but one of the things that interests us is trying to find like a third space between common everyday language and the clinical language, a poetic space where we can meet and maybe communicate to some point. Yeah. And then we're also interested in trying to research, depict the role of the doctor as something else. And it has been, because in literature, there's a big tradition of the doctor in text always being like an evil character or a funny character you make fun of. And we would like to try and widen the doctor's roles as, by focusing on the exactly. Yeah. Yes. So shall we just?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can we have the first slide?
Okay. The emergency room, C2. This condition, impossible to describe. It's glossy and sleek. A grape hyacinth, a chain of dog roses. I'm a small, small girl, so is my child. I die from lifestyle diseases. I labor in the bed. It is always my fear of death that's driving me. I can, for example, quickly get run over by a car on a right-hand turn. It is movies that I have. They feel real, finally. Language is also a reality you can hold on to. Thank God. Haha. Shiny, shiny idiot bird. Yesterday I was flying. The sky, 2 pathetic moons, the color blue, an instant now. Things are still experienced only in glimpses. It's pure and fine. The couch I'm lying on, or the hospital beds creaking when you toss and turn in an uneasy dream. The room divider flickers on the hall. It's upholstered with fabric from the 80s or something like that. Turquoise. I'm longing to see other things and reflections. The sky, a dark light. I hadn't expected that this was the place I would be, that I'm really here. The bedroom is pale blue, complete. We're 3 white-coated ladies standing in here. I explain to the nurse I'm starving myself. He says, it's impressive I've lost so much weight. Few are able to do that. I'm supposed to tell him how many drinks I drink a week. I lie. You always have to have one secret. I told you all of mine, that's how it feels. In the morning when you wake, you think about your projects. You're in a different world than me. I ask you which it is. Which world are you in? You can't access each other's minds. That isn't something that makes me sad anymore. An ice pick. It is as if I gave birth to you. The doctor asks if I'm in love and I answer no. I can sense the room dividers in the hall flickering a bit. Some movie music. They say my name. The doors open and close. It's the same heavy doors as those at the university. I'm not sad but confused. My problem is I don't know how I am. The changes I can't keep up. It's somebody's turn to be kind to me. Help, I know I need. The light shines in the hall. A skylight creates a spotlight on the pale blue armchair I'm sitting in. The light in the day room isn't on. Squares of light on the floors and the walls. The desire to see the shadow of your own hand project on the wall. In the waiting room, the sun's waves in the lighted square on the floor, small movements like smoke. I raise my hand quietly. On a poster of a painting, a woman sits in a deck chair. She has a dog by her side. In the corner, there's written Skagen. The colors are really faded, becoming blue. The trees on the pictures have probably been green. I'm moving slowly to stay attentive. The garden doesn't look aroused except from a couple of daffodils growing from the soil. I apologize to everyone I come across. The need for forgiveness. I have a feeling that there's something I have done wrong. I knock on the door to the wrong office. The laboratory technicians ask me to take off my shoes. I lay in the bed. A blood sample must be taken, EKG. Later in the hall, they say you shouldn't wear your shoes. I get in doubt about what they really want from me. Someone is here. They have removed the plate that was on the table. Last night, 2 fire alarms started. I didn't hear them. Sarah was out smoking at 1 a.m. and 5 a.m., both times fire engines around. The weather is an unbelievable blessing today, a small forgiveness. The doctor presses on my stomach and asks, do I eat? I'm afraid of the cleaning woman. She enters my ward when I sleep, but I love the night watch, the white-coated. The student nurse, she says that it isn't a huge difference to be in my apartment or here at the hospital. She says it's more a sort of center, like the apartment, just with doctors and medicine. But it is a hospital I have found myself at. She cannot fool me to believe anything else. I know well where I am, it just feels unreal. The awakenings at night, like waking up in a strange house, the reminder. I know well it's Thursday. The weekend is useless. Blue sky, I'm convinced we will handle it. The sun forgives me when it shines, it's forgiveness. Ryan? Birgit is my doctor. She says that I have schizophrenia, that my illness has become more chronic. It is because I say, I am afraid that I am becoming chronically crazy. I woke up this morning and I was already crazy. It's just a word, she says, but there is so much pain attached to it that it cannot possibly be just that. It sounds dangerous. If it is just a word, then why do we say it? I become suspicious towards the medication. I close like a snarl at night. I do not think clearly. I wish for the butterfly net so the thoughts can gather. The doctor writes in the journal, patient rather perplexed, I know it well. I fail constantly in explaining. The translation can be impossible. It is hard to tell how long I have had it like this because 1, it changes all the time. 2, remembering is difficult. The only thing I know is that half of the time I feel crazy. The other half of the time, I'm afraid of going crazy. From the main
Okay. Department A1, 1st of March, Anna, 27 years old, preliminary interview. Patient transferred from the emergency room, admitted to hospital through choice, known to have schizophrenia spectrum disorder, currently exacerbation of psychotic effect, with sudden shifts in feelings spanning from euphoria to suddenly onset anxiety. Feelings of derealization and of leaving the body have aggravated, and the body also shifts size and proportions, which is anxiety triggering. Social, living alone, poet, first collection of poems published in the autumn. It was well received, got a great network with many close friends and a supportive family. Objective psychiatric assessment. The patient is awake, clear-headed, and oriented in time, place, and own data. The formal contact is reasonable but not complete. The patient is guarded and there's no emotional attunement. Mood is neutral. The face is paramimic, keeping a staring eye contact. Appears harassed, inclined to weep with barely any spontaneous speech. The psychomotoric tempo is reduced, arms and hands all motionless, sitting with the pelvic pushed forward but stiff through the whole interview. Answers laconically with formed sentences, bringing a coherent narrative that's primarily relevant. Formal thought disorder in the form of poverty of speech, idiosyncratic interpretation of signs and occurrences, experiences apophenia of unfamiliar patterns and connections. For example, a feather falling and the picture of a dog on the wall is a sign of God's love. Other things can indicate the presence of evil. No first-rank symptoms, but a disturbed self-demarcation and experience of merging with the surroundings and body dysmorphic disorder that creates anxiety when moving through the traffic. Simultaneous trains of thought and thought interrupting each other in a confusing manner. Suicide risk assessment. No history with self-injury, no definite attempts, many thoughts about suicide. No concrete plans, but tend to feel that the metro was calling her name and can get pseudo-obsessions with inner films watching herself jump in front of the train. Estimated not to be in an acute risk of suicide when admitted to hospital, but increased when discharged. The patient is clearly and reliably able to distance herself from suicide and self-mutilating impulses. Estimation of risk of suicide level 1, acute insomnia, sleeps 4 to 5 hours, wakes up at 5 a.m. Assessment and plan. Decompensated schizophrenia, presumably provoked by alcohol and a reduced medication compliance. Body dysmorphic disorder, Alice in Wonderland syndrome, can doubt whether arms and legs are part of her body. Derealization, affect dysregulation, and ego-dystonic thoughts, including pseudo-obsessions and trains of thoughts. Admitted to the hospital in good faith for stabilizing treatment and medicine adjustment. Insufficient antipsychotic medications, ideally add-on anxiolytica. We start antipsychotic crossover with recipe perfenazine 2 milligrams plus diminishment of Abilify 10 milligrams, recipe oxazepam 15 milligrams, max 3 times a day.
We're sitting next to each other in the conference room. This is the place one can have visitors. You can have one regular visitor. One must select a time span and write one's name on the timetable, like selecting a wash at the laundromat. There are way too many tables in here. A poster of a painting by Monet. Unpowered desktop computers. I'm in the rabbit hole. I don't know where you are. You're always trying to get me out. In flashes it happened, mostly when we talk about something other than illness. You put on your video on your computer from Region Hovedstaden. I close my eyes and rest my head on the tabletop, listen to the voices, the cool surface touching the cheek, sanitizer and linoleum, the tears between table and skin, moist and warm, the smell of salt, quiet, and then the sound from the computer speaker. You stroke my hair.
Department A1, Anapsychosis, 15th of March 21. Next slide. Okay, it's not on there. It's okay.
Vanda? No. Oh, the next one as well.
No. Go back. I think you have to go back. It only gets... Did I?
Skal du listen der?
Nej, den er ikke med.
Okay. It only gets brighter. The days are long and shaped like boxes. Death is a little beetle. Who has moved into my body? So many creatures visit my house. The sun is behaving wildly. Have I ever been so sad? Birgit says, it's the illness talking. You can tell things apart by giving them names. We sit in a park somewhere on Amager. There are school kids playing in the grass. I am unhappy. You point at 2 different bushes. The one has snowberries. Anna, what happens when you close your eyes? Where are you? What are you thinking about? Anna, I feel crazy. Birgit, you are crazy. Porous like porcelain.
If I, as it says in the psychotherapy book, am your reality organ, you may also be mine. I'm the worst patient in the world. I'm standing in the elevator of University Hospital Copenhagen. It's a strange place for me. I've stood here as a medical student on my way to my first residency in a white coat that felt far too big. I've been standing here at night as a neurological duty officer on call for an alarm in the trauma center. I've stood here with when the water broke and contractions washed over my body, and 5 hours later I stood here again with a baby in my arms. Here in the same way, smells of linoleum, alcohol, and sweat hover in the same oppressive silence. The bottoms light up. The elevator is the main artery of the hospital because it is a vertical building in the middle of Copenhagen. On a few occasions, I've taken the way all the way up to the roof, up to the 16th floor, where the helicopter lands with emergency patients flown in from all over the country. I get chills looking at that button, just as I get nauseous whenever I hear sirens of ambulances. I once got so motion sick that I threw up on a patient while we were driving. I can still feel the shame burning in my earlobes. Today I have to go up to the 14th floor, the Department of Cardiology. I have to have my pacemaker checked. I did not show up the last 2 times. It was not on purpose. I was too busy at work, I think, or maybe there was a reluctance of some kind. The last time I had a heart operation, they placed the electrode wrongly. The tip had been pushed through the myocardium into the pericardium, the nerve sac of the heart, where the electric wire lay and gave electric shocks for 5 days. It felt as if a gigantic troll had laid down heavily on my chest and somebody had lit fire inside my heart. I called the department right after I got home and said it just felt wrong. A busy nurse told me to relax. It was always like that after an operation. On the second day, I was allowed to speak to a young doctor who sent me for an X-ray. Everything looked fine, he said, so you just have to relax. On the 5th day, I insisted on talking to a heart surgeon. The female doctor who'd done the operation had assured me that everything had gone well after the operation. She was one of the only 2 in Denmark who carry out this kind of operations. I wanted to know if I could count on coming home to my children again. Well, of that she was quite certain, so you just relax. When I was wheeled up in the hospital bed for the operation and the elevator, there was a doctor I went to medical school with. He got off on the 6th floor. I closed my eyes and sank into the synthetic chlorine smell of the bedding. Under the pre-washed duvet, I was wearing hospital clothes, a terry shirt with easy-to-open snaps and underpants with a grey border that means size XXL, the only ones left on the shelf. I felt like a roast pork in the refrigerator. On the operating bed being prepared, I felt the staff's professional friendliness as an insult. I knew the nurse anesthetist from the emergency center. It's hard to find a good vein on me, I said when she had to insert IVs. After the 3rd try, she got nervous. I tried to calm her down by talking about how annoying it can be with people with small veins and brown skin. Sleep well, she said before giving me propofol. The last thing I heard was the younger heart surgeon who said, gosh, she was talking a lot, she must have been a psychiatrist. I got off on the 14th floor. I sit in the waiting area with the other heart patients, only overweight men over 70 with ashen faces. I'm a little ashamed of not showing up for the last checkups. I know they're busy and could have given the time. Not their fault that I don't know how to be a good patient, but I'm the doctor. I cannot fall ill others. Find someone else to lavish your mercy on. I really don't want it.
The head so light it is floating. Out in the suburbs, my mother carries branches from the garden. Buds on a tree are swollen. The errands are just lying there in the forest floor. They talk their own language, like a holiday abroad. An overripe fruit in somebody's hands. A peach in the lap. Beggars. A fountain full of coins. They are quiet. The dogs flock around our legs on the square. All the orphans. What loneliness can find us here? You can reserve a sun chair with a towel in the early morning. It is symbolical. I'm really just sitting behind the window that separates me from the birds. A gaze can be frost clear. You can wake from a scream. Someone can visit you in the middle of the night. A longing grows towards the mole, towards the sea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, hello. Thank you. Yes, it was so, I don't know how to describe it, so nice to listen just quietly. So it feels a little bit like stupid to ask questions somehow, but I will do it still. Or is there someone in the audience who wants to ask a question even?
Hi, thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you for sharing all of that. Thank you for taking art in the context of mental health. I'm curious about how you're using text, because I have tried to make a project where we used sound, which was very, very difficult. Because of mental health issues, the use of sound, which I could not imagine as a curator, and the artist that I was working with could not imagine how complicated it is to put a sound piece to someone who has disorders. And then we figured out that as soon as an art piece would be interactive and patients would be able to be more in control of their experiences with an art piece, it was easier. So since you've been doing it so much with text, and I think maybe from your center also with other types of art pieces and experiences with art, I was wondering if you could share a little bit on the sensitivities and how, because I'm sure in this room there's a lot of institutions that are quite interested in this engagement.
I listened to especially two things, that the inclusion process is extremely important. The assessment is important. What I also hear you talk about is that the collaboration with the institutions is extremely important. It's really difficult to come in from the outside into mental health care, which is like very powerful, very structured, and very busy institutions with their own laws and rules and a very hierarchical order. It's only been possible because I've been working there. So, and I have my colleagues who trust me, and I have a boss who trusts me, and he knows that I'm not going to do anything that's irresponsible. Then we have also, it was a long process to engage staff. Even the nurses on my own ward were suspicious about what is this that you're coming with. So that takes time. It took a lot of coffee and cake, a lot of cake. To convince them that we were not going to do anything that was harmful and not evidence-based and blah, blah, blah. So you have to, for me, it's a struggle of language. There are different language discourses in the hospital and in poetry and in arts. And the whole issue of translation, I think, is really important, because even though we speak the same language, we still speak very different languages. But what's interesting is that the issue of participation, that's an issue in the art world, but also in mental health care, is how do you engage people in true participation, where people have agency and where they are really empowered. And being a user psychiatry is not just one thing, so the assessment is really important. So if you are a user who, for example, have very over-inclusive senses, it means that you hear way more than so-called normal people do, then it can be extremely helpful, but it can also be very difficult to be in projects that involve sound. So my argument is that we need more person-centered interventions where you can feel this is something for me. I would never volunteer to a drama project. So for me, it's so frightening to be in that space, but I've had to participate, so I also had to move out of my comfort zone. We also had a famous Danish rapper who came and did rap workshops, and there is a small population of especially young men who sit at home and make their own rap music, who don't want to talk to me as a doctor. And they just, opened up and shared things because they felt that he was talking their language. So I could, in that workshop, get a lot of information and connect with them a totally different way than in the clinic. So the assessment is really important, and the question is how to create spaces for true participation agency is also really important, and it's a complicated question. We have to talk a lot more about it. Yeah. Yeah. But it takes what you also mentioned, it takes, we like this idea of hybrid spaces. So our participants are recruited through their treatment. And it means that they are offered this participation as part of their treatment program through people they trust. And if they don't trust us, then of course it's not a good offer. So the healthcare people has to make a thorough assessment and think, because I know this patient so well, I think that would be a really good offer for you to be there, so I can introduce this to you. If someone is very over-inclusive with their senses, that might not be the right solution. So we have a workshop now, 15 weeks, with famous Danish actors, like Oscar-winning Danish actors, and some of the participants, one especially is chronically psychotic, and she becomes very ill after each session, but she insists on coming, and her mental health care, her nurse says that she's never seen her so happy. So it's not just the reduction of symptoms that is the goal with psychiatric treatment, it's also offering possibilities for joy, meaningful engagement with other people, and something that you think is fun and cool. So she goes home and she tells her family about, I've been with this famous actor, and she takes selfie with him. She's still psychotic.
It's also about living in isolation to some extent, and not being part of being part of the society and the normal cultural activities that exist in society. Sorry.
Yeah. So create possibilities, and I think that's the structural responsibility, that you set up spaces that are responsible. We work with the concept of holding environments. It's taken from infant psychology, that for children to develop in a healthy way, they need holding environments where they can feel safe and nurtured, even in the case of crisis. And if you are in a holding environment, then you can engage in play. And playfulness is a crucial moment in any healthy development, and also for grown-ups. So it's this combination of holding spaces and engagement in play that we think is the active ingredients. So because it's also a research project, so we're very engaged in these questions about where is the health-promoting factors, and is there a language for it, and can we reproduce it? Can we describe it in ways so that other people can reproduce it?
Thanks. I think we need to move on and come back to you also in the later conversation. Thanks a lot. Now we're going to have a presentation by Eva Koťátková. Eva, can you hear us?
Yes, good morning.
Yes, and we can hear you also. That's great. So I just briefly introduce you and what you're going to speak. Eva is doing, as an artist, a large-scale installation exploring how social structures such as community, family, and institutions relate on individual experiences and creative processes. Exploring how institutions organize and archive their activities and how systems affect the individual involved. This is like maybe referring more to your personal work, but in this conversation, Eva is presenting Project Futuropolis, School of Emancipation, which aims to renew the possibilities of education as a social power for a future by bringing together educators, artists, activists to renew the curriculum in Czech context. Please have you have about 20 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation, and I'm really very grateful to be and honored to be here among these presenters. And I'm just really sorry to not be able to be there with you physically, which is always the best for me. So hopefully next time. I also have a baby sleeping in the next room, so I'm hoping she will have really nice dreams and she will stay sleeping for as long as needed for my talking. Thank you for the introduction. I would just like to add few more things, because I'm involved in several projects and platforms, just to give a bit more of a frame from where I depart to to the projects I'm involved in. I'm a member of the Institute of Anxiety, which is a platform which looks at anxiety and its systemic causes, and tries to develop different formats of sharing, inviting artists, activists, scientists, and so on to join. And actually, only a few days ago, we organized a public hearing, which is a specific event developed by the Institute, which was focused on the field of education. So there is its limits and possibilities in the current setup or current system. I also recently initiated formation of a collective called Daydreaming Working Station, which works with critical imagination and daydreaming while actually being even more awake than we usually are. I also recently was happy to be part of a collective who initiated establishment of a publishing house, a children's publishing house, where children are the authors of the stories which are being published, in opposition to the concept of adults trying to think about what might be appropriate stories for the kids. So that's what we are just starting to explore or work more around. So I guess I could speak also about these activities, because they are very much related to the team that you set up for today. But I will try to stay as focused as I possibly can on the project Futuropolis School of Emancipation, which is a collective project. It is a 3-year-long project, which is almost at its end, unfortunately, this December. Our goal and vision is quite large and ambitious, and it is to educate a generation that will create a world that works for everyone, not just adapt to the current unsustainable way the world is set up. We want to investigate how transformative education can be done, which means one that leads to the transformation of individuals, groups, and society. Its purpose is to constantly critically question the current unsustainable status quo, to lead to the co-creation of new knowledge, and also to actions that will transform the world around. With this huge intention, we are conducting an experiment. The project brings together a group of Methodists, artists, selectors, but also pedagogues from different primary schools in Czech Republic, specifically for children at the 2nd grade, which at the Czech school system means children aged 10 to 14, I would say. We are testing Paulo Freire's critical pedagogy approach in the Czech educational environment. And we try to combine it with methods of system thinking and future thinking, and put an emphasis on the involvement of emotions, senses, art, and imagination. We believe that exactly thanks to the combination of these approaches, education can become a tool for functional social transformation. We are persuaded that while the lack of education is commonly seen as a problem, the current form of education is rarely seen as the root of current social problems. Our point of departure, therefore, is that current education helps to reproduce dysfunctional patterns. It leads to passivity, helplessness, dependence on authority, individualism and competitiveness, simple answers, and black and white visions of the world, overlooking systemic causes or dulling our emotions, senses, and imagination. In addition, we believe that the next generation is not preparing for a complex world of constant changes and social challenges, such as the climate crisis, growing inequalities within and across the states, the threat of automation to work, the rise of populism, the impact on what is considered in this society a mental health concept, and so on. Our process of inquiry and experimentation thus begins with a series of questions, which are how to bring an understanding of the systemic causes of today's problems already to the 2nd grade of primary schools, how to go beyond the boundaries of mind-centered education and awaken the adult senses of the body, how to expand the imagination of what kind of work is possible, how to get out of the we know, you learn patterns and learn together, how to educate for a world that does not yet exist, how to find comfort in discomfort, inner stability, in uncertainty, how not to avoid controversial political issues of today in education and at the same time not to indoctrinate. How to critically unravel power relations, ask who is interested in maintaining the situation, who benefits from it, and at the same time not divide society but connect it. So to sum up, our goal is to create education that students will find meaningful and that will equip them with the skills of empathy, critical or system thinking, visionary thinking, so that they can create the world of the future in which they wish to live. We use a metaphor of a spiral to demonstrate our method. We are actually still in the process of developing. With this method, we want to support pupils as well as teachers and us as well in self-confidence to actively shape the future. And this self-confidence should lead to the belief that the teachers and pupils can influence and can change the things that affect their lives. They think or rethink the change through understanding of the causes of the current situation and direct it towards a future that is peaceful, sustainable, diverse, and classless, and fulfills the needs of all. To accomplish this goal, one must ask difficult questions about the current situation that can evoke many emotions. Entering into such a dialogue requires courage and often the necessity to remain for some time in discomfort and uncertainty without an answer, to have patience with complex topics and see them in a systemic context. The premise of this work is that teachers share their power with students and model democratic and dialogic relationships at school. Therefore, part of conscious critical pedagogy is the opportunity for students to determine the purpose, content, and process of teaching. And now, finally, I'm getting to how does our method work and how we do this. We combine critical pedagogy, as I mentioned, with system thinking and future thinking. The critical approach questions everyday norms and the given order of things, and presents them as a problem for investigation and links understanding of a problem to action. I guess I do not have to speak much about critical pedagogy, but just in a few words, the main things that we are taking from it. For us, critical pedagogy is really important base and point of departure as a form of education whose goal is to ensure students civic awareness of justice, social equality, and all forms of manipulation, and support them in their own civic activity. In the concept of teaching, the teacher is a partner and also a guide for students, guarantees a dialogic process, asks critical questions, and provides independent thinking and support for students. And the topics of critical pedagogy relate to social issues and are closely connected to the everyday experiences of students and pupils. The process of critical pedagogy therefore supports students in overcoming the inner feeling of passivity, civic helplessness, and naive civic ideas. Then system thinking supports perception and action based on interconnectedness of humans, non-human beings, and the environment, and allows individuals to be seen in a network of relationships. And future thinking method strengthens the ability to imagine possible future scenarios, to formulate wishes and visions of future development, and to recognize and appreciate what already works as we wish. We can outline the approach with these questions. I will just choose some, so because it's quite an extensive list. What are we observing? What bothers us? How do we understand what is happening? On what assumptions is our understanding based? Is this state of affairs given and immutable? What is the problem? Who maintains the status quo? Who benefits from this? Who does it affect? What is my role in this? What do we desire? What would make the world a better place for everyone? What if? An important question. Where can we see the if now? What can we do about it now? What are we going to do? The model or the metaphor of a spiral which actually I think it's running in the loop presentation, but I will just also show it here if it's being seen at the moment. What can be the model of or metaphor of a spiral offers more details to our approach and process. The spiral consists of phases, so which we proceed when we try to recognize, name, analyze, and change the problem. The first phase we call awakening from silence. The purpose of this first phase is to support the motivation of individuals and groups to address topics that are not normally addressed and that have a social and systemic dimension. In this phase, participants share their experiences and look for a common problem and their inner motivation to explore it. We gain motivation when we find a relationship between the topic and our own life. Learning thus becomes meaningful. The output of the following step is a named problem ready for investigation. Feelings like frustration, anger, but also apathy show that something important to us is at risk. Therefore, in this phase, students pay attention to the feelings and describe the experiences that cause the feelings, while teachers notice the topics and their civic political dimension. When the topic is brought by the teacher, he or she offers the group a stimulus related to the topic in the form of a code, which is something we use at Futuropolis project quite frequently. This can be an image, a story of another, or another impulse which provokes emotions, opens up questions, and serves as an anchor to which we can refer in later sections. The next phase is critical inquiry or critical research. In this phase, we try to understand the causes of the problem and the roles we play in it. We want to understand the problem systematically and understand who it affects and who can benefit from the problem. An important principle is the collaborative work of teachers and students. Together they take the problem as a subject of collective investigation. We map the problem, we share sources of information like articles or books or different facts, and look at their sources, of course, interviews and so on. We try to understand the problem systematically. Very often the problems we deal with have cyclical nature. The consequence of the problem is at the same time its cause. Therefore, to understand the problem, we need to look at cause and effect relationship, at how problems change over time and at the assumptions that make the problem possible. Power becomes a central theme here in this phase. We ask who maintains the settings, who is the setting for, whose voices are not being heard, who is affected by the problem. We make visible and name power inequalities and possible consequences for other actors. We are looking for how individual actors are related to each other, how they can influence each other. In this case, visualization in the form of mind map or map of actors is very much a helpful tool to support the process. We ask, very importantly, where am I in the problem? Formulating your own position, in this case, allows you to see yourself in the network of the problem as an actor who is connected to it and who can influence it. The next and very important phase is imagination. In this phase, we engage the imagination into the process and train our ability to create visions of another world. We have understood, or at least we have an inkling what the problem is at this stage. We now also know what causes it, so we must engage a radical imagination to look for new and unexpected ways to approach it. Being able to imagine things differently is an important step towards liberation. It is important to distinguish, as Freire points out, imagination from escape into a false world. Imagination here is meant to help us move forward, not run away or find some temporary place for escapism or hiding. Our imagination can be limited by our prejudices and low self-esteem. We need to emancipate it because it may be bound by years of incalculating obedience and uncritical obedience to authority. And the purpose of this phase is to spark imagination, dream, and collectively model alternative parallel futures that will solve problems and answer our desires. It begins with individual imagination, and in the process it ends with collective imagination. And its result is the articulation of visions and insight into where to go in the next phase, which is strategy and tactics formulation. In this phase, we name our position in the problem and visit our own power or powerlessness. We ask, where am I in the problem? Formulating your own position allows you to see yourself in the network of the problem as an actor who can influence it. Then it will be easier to see possible opponents, antagonists, and their motivations, as well as possible allies, others who have a similar position to us and our own limiting situations. The group considers where the weak points of the system are and where the so-called leverage points are, which are those points of the system that can be confronted and expected to have the greatest impact on changing the system. So we are asking, where are the leverage points in the system? What changes could be enabled to the system to move? In the final stage, the group considers very specific and practical questions related to the event. Who wants to participate? What role will we need? Who will do what and when and how and so on. The last phase is action and reflection. We are proceeding with the implementation of what we have planned. At this stage, action is a process which is loaded with learning about ourselves, about the world around, about the people around, about our influence, about our potentials. It is therefore important that the experiences from the implementation are named and framed in the follow-up reflection so that they can be transferred to life. And during the event, the teacher is mainly in an observing and supportive role, at the same time watching the events and preparing the subsequent very important step of reflection, in which the formulation of what the event managed to achieve and what the group planned thanks to this experience should take place. Even if the event did not achieve what it set out to do, it is very important to reflect. It can function as a catharsis for emotions, disappointments, even hopeful questions for the future, and becomes a new starting line for awakening from silence and therefore a new spiral of critical pedagogy. Questions that can be asked in the reflections are, for example, what happened? How did the event go? How did we feel during it? What was the impact? What were the reactions? Did the event make the impact we intended? What did we succeed in? What do we want to do differently next time? What did I learn about myself and about the group? What have you learned about our influence? Important question. And how was my or our perspective on the problem changed? I have just described the main part of the method, which is then tested through numerous different tools, activities, codes, stories, and so on, that can be used and tested during school lessons or education through the whole education process. But what is equally important to us in the team and in the project is, and this is, I suppose, my main role in the project, or my involvement in the project, to think about how to bring back to the game, or how to work with senses, emotions, and in general awaken and connect our bodies in the process of education. Emotions and senses are an important part of knowing and perceiving relationships with the world. When we miss them, we significantly limit our knowledge. Emotions are a direct part of learning and can thus support it or stand in its way. So they are not just some kind of a sticker to the cognitive component that we can decide to include or neglect in teaching. Senses are important channels through which we can connect to and be with others in this world. And yet at schools, at least those that we have experience with, still learn only about 5 of them through redundant exercises that keep our bodies asleep or not engaged in the subjects we are exploring. In the process of critical pedagogy, we can ask who benefits from our bodies being disconnected in the process of education, why our senses are being switched off, not encouraged, left silent, and why our emotions are being controlled as soon as we enter the public space, or especially when we enter the public space, and how does this then affect the ways we are able or not to connect to ourselves, the others, to the world around. How can we not continue in seeing children as human sources, tools of effectivity and economic growth, while their bodies are being systematically normalized, labeled, restricted in what they can do or what they can or cannot do? So the project, the School of Emancipation, is coming to its end, and we at the moment work on building a network of critical pedagogues in Czech Republic. We just realized our first summer school of critical pedagogy, and this year, and which was very, very inspiring, also very emotional to see such a big group to join. And we try to move our method and its materials pedagogues can work with onto a website which can be used in the future as a source. But we also saw that we didn't give enough energy to the testing of ways how we can work with the senses, emotions, and imagination in the education process. And so we are just starting a new year-long series of workshops or working sessions for pedagogues, museum educators, and pedagogy and art students. The series is called School of Imagination, and actually, if it was not happening so far and in Czech language only, I would have loved to invite you to join us as well in the team or in the working group. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. We could have a very short comment question in here. No, everyone's hungry or something. Paula said yes. Okay, I have a very just short. You a little bit went into it. This like a process of working with people, or like who do you, or what has been the forms of engagement in a way with the project. Summer school, you mentioned about workshops. So it would be nice to hear a little bit like how the kind of education community or the people who you worked with have received the project in Czech context. Is it some really new critical pedagogy as kind of new aspect for them, or how has it been?
Yeah, so indeed, critical pedagogy approach, even so, I'm sure it's much more used or applied in the education methods or processes elsewhere in Czech Republic. It's something very, very new and something that has been put aside for many years in the past from various historical political reasons and so on. And with the project, we started with an open call. Explaining our intentions and inviting pedagogues from different primary schools of the second grade to join us in the process. So we created a group of 20 pedagogues plus our team to form a kind of working group, and this is already our third year of existence, during which we are meeting on regular sessions, symposiums, and so on, to develop the method and then to also test it in the classrooms or elsewhere, wherever the teachers take the pupils, and then we see what's working, what's not. So it's a really like a back and forth, or not even like that. It's really like a spiral process of impulses and feedbacks and a collaboration across different fields and discipline. The important part is also that the team is composed from people from both the theoretical and pedagogical field, but also from people from the cultural artistic field who can bring different perspectives, which I consider extremely important. At this stage, we are trying through different channels, through writing articles to the media, or doing lectures or workshops, or through the summer school, which we are hoping will continue or will become a regular event. We are hoping to make the community of critical pedagogues, or whoever actually who wants to use the critical pedagogy in their practice bigger and growing and sustainable, of course, so to support as much support as we possibly can.
Thank you, Eva. I think I will now, because we are running a bit late, so we could go, if it's okay for people to go, I'm thinking about speakers here, to go to directly on the conversation, or is it fine for you? Okay, so let's have you on the stage so we can have maybe 15 minutes and then we can also eat. Anissa and Eva, you can hear us too? Good. I just wanted to start like one question, because some of you were addressing that more directly and some maybe more not so more directly. But anyway, I think the question of translation came up very much, or like the how to describe, like as a way of creating some kind of own space, which is maybe outside of, like in between the institution and individual, as a kind of way of creating a emancipatory space, or possibility to have a change, or translating between different contexts, between individuals, between institution and individual, to kind of affect on how the power relations work, how to kind of create new possibilities or new societies, even on this in a way. So it could be nice to hear a little bit more about, maybe, I don't know, Arlene and Anastasia, you can start from like speak like about how do you feel about all the translation, what it does kind of allows the people to imagine while they are doing it or while it happens.
I think it's also about a mindset that, you know, you mentioned briefly how you have been creating a safer space with your groups. We didn't get into that so much, but instead of saying that now we're going to make an art piece, it kind of lessens the pressure if you say, let's make a translation or an interpretation. And when we're together, we say, like, you're the translator. You choose how you want to translate, what you pick up. This is your meaning-making process. So it's, that's one, maybe differentiation of how translation has been implemented. And I also want to just quickly say thank you to those of you who have given us translations already. Here's a sculpture, drawings, so yeah.
Can I comment on that? Because it interests me very much, because in the field of psychiatry or psychopathology, the question of translation is interesting, something we talk a lot about, because inner phenomena are not always translatable into linguistic science. And when you meet the doctor, sometimes it's not even ripe enough, so you can ask, you can express it or share it or say yes or no to the formulated question you ask. So first of all, there's a translation for something that can be extremely private. And I think it's for all of us that our most private experiences, maybe inside our organs even, it's not fittable into language. That has to be a social construct. It's the dictum of the philosopher Wittgenstein, who defined language as something that has to be social. It means at least one other person has to make sense of your expression. It means that there's also laws and grammar of language, and I think it's important, of course, and I understand, and I think it's very sympathetic and right to say it's your meaning-making process, but I think it's also that art is also a language that you have to be introduced to. So at least we try to give at least people some basic touch on the grammars and rules and mastering of techne, which is also like a part of it. And if you can't draw, if you've never drawn anything, then maybe it can be helpful to get a little bit of introduction to that language, because for some it comes more natural, some are natural talents, some are born into families where they're introduced to artistic expressions. And for us, what we see of some of the effects, because we run a research program on everything we do, and some of the surprising results are that some of those who benefited the most from the groups were not better artists, but what they did was that they de-installed the capitalist mindset of having to do something right in there, and allow themselves to just have fun. But also that they felt safe because the spaces are extremely structured. There are clear rules, there are clear roles, and that there's this common activity that's equal for everybody, and it's introduced in a very structured way by an authority, an artist who know what they're doing. So the authority in the room is really important, and I think it's also problematic not to signal an authority in the room, because that can also be very anxiety provoking. If can we just do everything, or what can we do and not do? And so we are also very directive in one phase of the process in the beginning, and then in the middle phase, people feel more comfortable in expressing them because they master the techniques or simple techniques, and then it comes. So, but we also have the luxury of having them 15 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a luxury.
Yeah, but the time span is important with it also, because in the beginning everybody sits with this, what is this kind of room, what are we allowed to do? So maybe you stay there, no rules, but we feel that maybe there are some rules, but we're not kind of sure what's going on. So with the first 2 times, the anxiety level is like this, and then in the middle phase you can start to work much more intensely if the connections are there. So we work with the concept of resonance to kind of stimulate the voices that are not, in the beginning, not yet clear, but when they are clear, then you can start to work much more intensely with them. Yeah.
Anissa or Eva, do you want to continue from here?
Sorry, I didn't hear.
I'm just asking. Anissa, maybe I'm kind of trying to formulate it more maybe for your context or for your work. I was thinking about this kind of you showed about this signs in the public space, for example, this signs, and then I'm kind of interested about like kind of translation process of your idea, or like how that works in the community on that people who you are working with, like. What are the how to translate the idea of sign? Of course, people are very familiar what is sign in that sense, but somehow like also like kind of this. Yeah, do you get what I'm kind of meaning? Or like it would be nice to hear about that a bit.
Are you asking about how the signs were received, or in terms of like because the thing is with the signs, I view the project as tapping into an already known language and an already known experience. One being the signs that you see all over our neighborhoods: no parking, no trespassing, don't block the driveway, private property. So those are knowns in the neighborhood, ways in which we dictate how we can navigate our spaces, what we can and can't do, who is allowed to be in this space and who's not. The other part is that by pulling the lyrics from the music, neo soul is a genre of Black music that is that's very that was very well known and very popular at the time. And neo soul in particular was about Black is beautiful music that I love, all things Black people, Black culture, my Black is beautiful. So to be able to take those two disparate things, the rules and the regulations of how we are in our space with lyrics that are life affirming and loving, and bringing them together, then how then can we disrupt what's being translated to us in our space? Maybe that's a way to kind of think about it, that we have these rules of how we talk to each other. And then we have another set of experiences about how we love one another. How can those, when you bring those two together, how can they problematize, what we're seeing, what we're experiencing, because our very space that we inhabit is so very problematic. It's not serving us. So is there not a way to inject a more loving way about how we think about our spaces and how we interact with one another? That was the hope.
Then I'm also thinking about, maybe this is more specifically for Eva, that you were also speaking about critical pedagogy quite a lot, and like it has of course theory and a kind of theoretical background, and like somehow it's been developed in the kind of education context, and then you are somehow working also as you said, like who you've been working with. It would be interesting to hear like how how this theory or ideas of theoretical pedagogy is. Of course, you work with the people who are familiar with the pedagogy in general, but somehow it would be nice to hear like what it requires to kind of bring these ideas into that context. That's I'm also thinking about as a translation in a way.
Yes, thank you for the question. Actually, it was one of the big tasks for us in the team, which we didn't realize probably naively at the very beginning, that it will be such a big thing. But naturally, it is like how to bring the sometimes complicated, sometimes heavy language of either Paulo Freire, with all the respect to his thinking, how to bring it, not only how to translate it into the Czech language, which sometimes we struggled even with that, but then also how to translate it so that the language is really accessible. And it is not. It is still. It still contains the main thoughts, the main concepts, but it doesn't put too many obstacles to the reader or to the viewer. So I think in the project we realized very soon on or very early on that there are two things that we have to focus on very much. One was to focus on how to make the verbal and written language more inclusive and accessible, both in, I don't know, of course, gender neutrality is one thing, because Czech language is very much burdened with this. So we were working very much on that, but also how to make it more accessible somehow to basically everyone who would encounter critical pedagogy, who would be interested in it. And the second was trying to support different ways of expression apart from the spoken or written word, which is something that we are doing very much now, especially in the past year. So trying to bring as much other types of communication or ways of expression into the education process itself. So keeping moments of silence or moments when the body can speak or connect differently and so on.
Thanks. Is there any question, comment from audience, or everyone's so hungry, or what? Tired, hungry? Okay, I have a final thing which I would like to somehow all of you react in some way. It can be short, but it's a kind of a question which I, when was thinking through this whole session, I was thinking quite a lot about that how your work in kind of inside the institutions in a way, and then of course it's hard to differentiate institution and not institution. This border is kind of porous. But anyway, it would be nice to hear like what have you learned? I think maybe for your other work or life or you as a human beings, or you as a citizens, or you as a kind of persons engaging with other people from this work within these institutions, or with your practice in these institutions, kind of like what to bring out of it from the kind of broader context or something like that. Does this make a sense? Is it a huge question or small one? Do you want to start, Anastasia?
I can. Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind from my work is for sure that judgment is something that I've brought up already at the beginning of my presentation. Is how to address judgment in myself and then in others, and how that is constantly present in our lives, and how, of course, the different scales that are in imprisonment and crime, and the kind of understanding of judgment when it's come to official judgment, like that somebody said that this is like bad, or we understand that something's done is bad, and then how we constantly judge ourselves like in our everyday life in much different scale. And I don't know, it's just something that I constantly working, and something that keeps coming back to me and being addressed in different ways maybe.
Thank you. Birgit, do you want to?
Maybe I would like to answer with the problem and staying with the problem of translatability. I still think that power struggles are struggles of language, and working within the system. So of course our positions are different because I can open the doors from the inside, and it gives some other possibilities and some other restrictions. But I think in the whole Western world, the positivist language is the current power language, and it's something we're investigating, this translationability of the power language of the doctor, and the power of who has the legal right to describe another person in a medical journal, and that is a very powerful tool that can feel very humiliating. When it's best, it should also be enlightening and helpful, and psychiatric diagnoses are also linguistic categories that we have invented to be able to solve problems, but they have become politically power tools in a lot of different ways. So for me, I think the attention to language, where language comes from, what discourses they are part of, is a really important subject here amongst us. How do we develop language to talk to each other? The question that we raise with the manuscript is it possible? Maybe it's just not possible. Maybe it is impossible for a doctor and a patient to meet in a mutual language. But they can meet on more equal terms in poetry than in the institution of the psychiatric institution. And maybe these openings or these between spaces that sometimes get lost in translation, but also open up new possibilities to talk together, which I think is somehow a topic here also in this venue. Right?
Arlene, do you want to go next?
Well, what motivates me and what I absolutely love doing is creating experiences, creating spaces where we can open dialogue, and using translation techniques has been one way to do that, to bring awareness of your meaning-making process in connection to this one object, how to never take things out of context. And you know, when Anastasia invited me to join Prison Outside, I was so grateful to find a different way to work with people I never, you know, it's not even about the people, but just finding different ways and giving space for those voices. And I think this untranslatability is a huge challenge I have as well, and that's why I stick with it, because how do you make visible the invisible, for example, and where are those boundaries of translatability? And these are things that we can figure out together through dialogue and having those opportunities to speak openly with others. Yeah.
Thanks. Anna, do you want to?
I'm not quite sure what to say.
Oh, so yeah, like maybe like something about, of course, like what you learned from the process, like how do kind of working with the poetry, or kind of a collective poetry or writing process within the.
Maybe you can talk about your group, your own group.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I've been in the project with the writing groups for 3-4 years now, and it has made a huge impact in my life in that sense that when I started, I could barely get out of my apartment or take a shower or walk my dog, brush my teeth. And now I just sitting in a room with other people was difficult. But I trained it, and now I'm leading my own group and watching the participants in my group develop themselves and seeing that from a distance. It really just what's it called? I'm very aware of how significant the work is. Yeah.
Thanks. Anissa, do you want to answer quickly for this?
I too am having a bit of difficulty understanding the question, because when I think about the work that I'm doing now, it's with a community that is very much decidedly outside, of being engaged by an institution, depending on how you look at it, by it being a community that's been divested, that is marginalized and disenfranchised, which is, why I was, sharing the ideas before, that it's about creating its own language. It's creating its own way. It's about engaging a group, about how do we come together? How do we engage? How do we move forward when the institutions that have been in place to serve us don't care about us, don't engage us? How is it that we can create our own ways of coming together and being, to then reshape and create ways of interacting that do serve us? Just because of just how disparate, just how much has been divested from the community, that it's proven itself that these institutions aren't there to serve them, don't engage them, give them no voice, no representation. So I'm not sure if I'm approaching or I'm answering your question, and I'm sorry that that's such a really hard note to end on. I'm so very sorry, but that is very much the reality of what happens with all of the gentrification and the supposed revitalization that's supposed to give us a better chapter. But when it's only for a group of us, that's not the path. So we have to create our own.
Yeah, so. I was a little bit also thinking about the maybe the community in a, like as an institution in a way, like kind of what you can learn from it in order to kind of change the institution which is outside of it, or something like that.
Definitely.
So this is something that I maybe you kind of answered it in a way, so it's fine.
Yes.
Eva, do you like last comment or last words?
Oh, this is a tough task, but maybe just quickly, perhaps I will react to how important for me it is to be in projects like that, like the project that I have just introduced or presented today. I would say that because I have been interested in the field of education specifically for a long time as an artist, and to be able to be part of such projects where I'm actually able to get to collaborate with people, with pedagogues who and the kids and so on, but also to discover what does it mean to fulfill a vision. So what kind of obstacles and limits you find on the way. In the case of education, it is, I don't know, it can be the 45 minutes short or long for someone lesson, or it can be the conditions of the space, which influences very much the process, or it can be the exhaustion of the teachers or of underpaid teachers, or the apathy of the pupils. And with all this, you are trying to create something. I guess I don't have a final word, but I just wanted to share that such experiences are extremely important to be part of, and then bring something to my artistic practice, where I'm trying to translate it into something perhaps a bit more abstract or a bit more emotional, let's say, or communicating through different means.
Thank you. Now we are having the lunch. Thanks a lot for all the presenters and speakers in this session, and please, there's a lunch order there. And then we kind of slipped from the lunch gradually towards the next session, so they are connected, recipes of commoning. So it kind of starts with the lunch, but it's going towards that.